My name is Jordan, and I will be presenting some workability and disadvantages to canceling the high-speed rail. And hopefully through looking at it, well, let me restart. First off, the goal of the high-speed rail is not to make money. The goal is a transportation network. It's expanding our existing transportation network. Just some numbers from the U.S. Census in 2010. The population of California was 37.3 million people, whereas in 2000 it was 33.8 million people, so roughly about a 10% population growth. And as Rod Darrington, who writes for the Mass Transit, which is an urban planning and transportation magazine, states, America needs high-speed rail because it makes good economic sense. California's population alone will double from its current 36 million to more than 60 million people by the mid-century. These citizens will need transportation. So the goal of high-speed rail is not to make money and bring California out of the deficit, but it's an alternative to building more highways. In a quote by Emily Rich, who wrote an article for Roads or Dollars for Rail in the New York Times, she states, providing transportation infrastructure for 20 million additional people in California will require significant investment no matter what mode we choose. The Brookage Institute reports that 6 million people already fly between the Los Angeles Basin and San Francisco Bay Area each year, making it the second busiest air corridor in the nation. Officials predict the show and traffic on Interstate 5 and California 99 in the Central Valley will double in the next 25 years. This means just to keep the same traffic volume that we have on these freeways, we're going to need to double. So making 5 from 2-lane in each direction to 4 lanes in each direction, which is the size of the 10 without the high speed, without the carpool lane. So it's really not, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go and build all these big interstates from point A to point B when there's a much more effective way, which is the high-speed rail to get us from Southern California to Northern California. Another interesting point that Rod Darrington points out in his article, High-Speed Rail, is that over the next 40 years, California will need to spend over $1 billion to meet the additional highway needs, the additional 3,000 mile lanes of highway that California will need to build. However, by the mid-century, so in about 2050, we'll need to spend an additional $100 billion just to build more highways to meet our increasing demand. Whereas if we build high-speed rail, it will meet the state's transportation needs until 2010 with no additional expenditure costs except to add more rolling stock. So we're not going to need to add on to this train except for more branches and just running more trains per day. He later goes on to say that high-speed rail will also increase our living conditions to the environment because of clean energy and the reduction in air pollution on highways, while also increasing urban living, which at the stations. Urban living brings in more money, brings in higher paying jobs. It's more densely packed, so people will support local. They'll shop locally. They stop shopping at Amazon where they can just go downstairs and go to the coffee shop down the corner that you don't have to drive as much. He also says high-speed rail is unaffected by, unlike air travel, it's unaffected by weather and delays. Security is extensive but non-intrusive, and therefore requiring little passenger delay. Overall, high-speed rail is safer and more reliable than air travel, with fast and predictable travel times that can be sustained over time. This makes high-speed rail more convenient than flying and ideal for one-way trips less than 600 miles. And then in another paper written by Gaines de Roos, who is a Spaniard, he studied the effects that high-speed rails had in Europe that are about the same distance of California's, ranging from 600 kilometers, anywhere from 3 to 600 kilometers, so 200 to 400 miles in length. And it actually was an interesting study because it showed that on average, After the construction of high-speed rail, the air traffic between the two endpoint cities, the hub cities, 70% switched to rail, whereas only 30% continued. So it's not like people aren't going to ride this rail. We can actually reduce our air traffic and increase, and hopefully the same will go for the freeways. People will stop driving, they'll start riding the train. There are some disadvantages with canceling high-speed rail. The first one is that actually high-speed rail at the stations increases property values. It's been said that the proper estimates place that increase 10 times the original value of property because high-speed rails help to catalyze high-density, high-value urban infill. A portion of these additional values would be captured by city redevelopment or revenue assessment districts, with a portion of that revenue investment in facilities supporting a high-speed rail. So as people start to live closer to the train because they need to use it often, they'll help grow the city and locally. High-speed rail also, while it doesn't necessarily ever break even, neither do highways. We're going to spend, our alternative to building high-speed rail is building 3,000 miles of highways. The highways don't make any money unless you count the gas tax. One thing that high-speed rail can do is, it's true across Europe and Spain that high-speed rails, and I quote Michael Moore, who is a writer for Miller McKern. It's true that across Europe, high-speed, from Spain to Russia, high-speed lines are something like the best sellers at a publishing house. Most popular marquee products that can bring income to fund other parts of a costly operation. The rule even goes for Acela's Amtrak, an outdated and slow high-speed rail project in the Northeast Corridor. Of all of Amtrak's services, Acela alone operates at a substantial surplus year after year, writes the qualitative analysis for Fulcrum Inquiry. The experience in other countries is the same. High-speed rail subsidizes slower inner-city line. So while the high-speed rail may never pay itself off fully, the profits that it does turn after its operating costs can help go to fund additional public transportation.